How am I going to recover from probably my worst ever game week score? Find out in this video. Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video on my channel. My name's Sam, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and to start off we're going to take a look, hopefully quite briefly, at what happened in game week 11. I could probably sit here in silence for a couple of minutes just trying to figure out what on earth went wrong. But I think it was a really low game week score for most people, and 22 points is a disaster. It's not good, and I think it's probably my lowest ever game week score. But when you compare it to the pack, I think I'm only about 10 points down on average. So it's not that much of a nightmare. If you've had a bad game week, I wouldn't panic too much. It's probably a good week to have a bad week against the average, because the average was in itself very, very low. So you probably haven't lost that much ground in terms of actual points. That being said, looking at my team, it was a shocker. Only 2 players returned in the entire starting 11. And those were the 2 players that I was probably the most nervous about. Bowen and Gordon both getting 7 points isn't a massive haul, but in this game week, it felt like it. And going into Monday, I was actually fairly content with how it was all going, with Son and Udogie to play. The first 15 minutes were going pretty well for Spurs. They looked electric. Son got that goal ruled out for a marginal offside, but then Udogie made that rash challenge, and then ever since that moment, Chelsea just took control. Obviously, the sending offs didn't help, and then Udogie, in my team, getting sent off on the 55th minute, I think it was, really took my score from what was not great to an absolute disaster. And obviously, when a defender gets sent off halfway through a game, any goals that team then concede beyond him being sent off also count towards his game week score. So Udogie got the minus points for getting sent off, and then obviously Spurs go on to concede 4 goals, which is another -2 for Udogie, resulting in -4. And it also means that he's suspended going into the next game. So what was going to be looking like quite an easy game week, looking forwards to game week 12, looks like a little bit of a nightmare to set up for. So let's have a look at how I'm setting up ahead of game week 12, because there's a lot of moves that I could be making and 2 free transfers in the bank to do so. So down to just inside the top million now. So what was a good couple of weeks has been kind of eroded over the last couple as well. And obviously the 2 red flags in defence do not help me moving forwards. What is good is that I've got 2 free transfers. No money in the bank, so I've got to be careful with my moves this week. But those 2 free transfers are going to come in really handy, especially in the back line. Starting off in goal, Areola against Nottingham Forest at home. I think that's an easy choice, especially now that Matt Turner has lost his place for Forest. That's maybe something I need to look at in the next few weeks, but because I've still got a starting keeper for the time being, the fixtures are still okay for West Ham, so I'm fairly happy to just leave Matt Turner as an issue to sort out down the line and hope that Areola continues to keep his place in goal for West Ham. Obviously, West Ham haven't been too great in defence, but it's better than nothing. Moving into defence, and luckily, Matty Cash looks like he's going to be fit for this game week. He looks, at time of recording, like he'll be fit for the European game in midweek. So hopefully that flag that is in FPL at the moment will get cleared soon. So fingers crossed that's not another issue I need to look into. But obviously 2 red flags on Udogie, who's suspended for 1 week, and Dan Burn, who looks like he's going to be injured for a good few months. So Dan Burn's probably the one that absolutely needs to get sorted out ASAP. And then Udogie is a 1 week issue. But when you look beyond this game week, Spurs fixtures defensively don't look ideal either. And when you take a look at Spurs generally at the back, a lot of their players are going to be out for a while now. So Udogie's out for 1 game, obviously. Then it's Van de Ven is out for who knows how long. It's a hamstring injury. Those tend to take a little while to come back from. And I would say that's at least 3 or 4 game weeks out. And then you've also got Romero suspended for the next 3 as well. Now, with all of that in mind, I'm not even sure I want to hold on to a Spurs defender, to be honest. So that could be another transfer out. And then Tsimikas lost his place against Luton. He could come back in against Brentford, but that's also a slight risk in terms of rotation now as well. And when you look on my bench, my 5th defender is Taylor. So against Arsenal away from home, not a great fixture, and Burnley are a terrible defence. So those are a lot of defensive issues I need to sort out, and 2 free transfers to try and sort it out isn't going to be easy, especially when I've got nothing in the bank. But I do have an idea of what I want to do with it, and I think I'm pretty happy with the moves I'm going to make. So let's take a look at what those moves are right now. So as I mentioned, Udogie and Dan Burn are probably the two major issues this week. And if I use both of my free transfers on these two players, then hopefully I'll have a starting back three that I'm pretty happy with. In fact, as long as they all do start, I'd be very happy with them. So Matty Cash would be number one. Then if I do sell Dan Burn, which seems like the most obvious transfer to make, that would be to Lascelles, and that's downgrading the position to a starting Newcastle defender. So I'm still covering off the clean sheet if they get one, and I'm saving 0.6 in the process. Now he's 4.7 at the moment, but I've got a sale value of 4.6. So I'll regain that 0.6 in the bank, and that actually helps to fund the other move, which would be getting rid of Udogie to ideally the likes of Saliba. Now, Arsenal are obviously a very good defence. They're putting up the best defensive numbers in the league so far this season. So I do want a slice of that defence if possible. Gabriel is another option I could look at, but I think he's just been rotated once too many times for me to feel ultra confident. And when you've got other issues in my side like I do, I really want that security of a starting spot week in, week out. So do let me know in the comments if you think you'd prefer the cheaper option in Gabriel. I would have then money in the bank for future moves in other game weeks, or whether maxing out all of the money in my bank from downgrading Dan Burn to Lascelles to afford Saliba is the play that you would go for. So the other option is to bring in Estupiñán, who looks like he might be back in contention for the midweek fixture in Europe, and then obviously he could then be playing from here on out in the league as well. Now, the problem there for me is that one, Brighton haven't kept a clean sheet all season, and two, we are a little bit concerned about his fitness still. He hasn't played in a little while. He'll probably be sort of brought back in slowly into the fold. And even though Brighton don't have a lot of options at left back right now, with Lamptey still out, his minutes could get managed a little bit. So despite the very good fixture against Sheffield United this week, I think I'm probably going to go for the safer option and have Saliba, who has had a rest recently. He should be starting for the foreseeable, and they do still have really good fixtures as well. So these are the two moves that I've got planned. Let's take a quick look at how they affect my starting 11 so far. So here are the moves being made. Now, obviously, my team value drops a little bit because I had money tied up in Dan Burn and in Udogie, but Lascelles and Saliba both starting in my starting 11 actually looks pretty comfortable for this week. Fulham at home for Aston Villa, Bournemouth away for Newcastle, and Burnley at home for Saliba. Those are good fixtures for all three of them, and I'd expect all three to start now. Tsimikas is also a good option against Brentford at home, but again, I've been put off ever so slightly by the fact that Klopp did rotate him out of the side against Luton. It seems the reason for that was because Gomez has the height to deal with the set-piece threat and the crosses. And Brentford are also very good from set pieces. They have a lot of danger men who are tall, who are very good in the air. And Tsimikas could, yet again, suffer from rotation there. So I'm a little bit worried about that. And I think Brentford are pretty likely to score. I would say they're more likely to score than Fulham, Bournemouth and Burnley are. So despite the attacking threat that Tsimikas gives, I think for this week, I do want to use those two free transfers to make sure that my back line is looking really solid. And having Lascelles and Saliba both in isn't just a play for this week, but also for the weeks ahead. I like them both as options, and especially Lascelles at 4 million. I don't need to start him every single week. He's a really good budget enabler to make moves elsewhere. So let me know what you think of those moves in the comments below. Let me know whether or not you think that there are other defenders I should be looking at. Maybe the Crystal Palace boys are good options as well. And let me know what you think of the backline so far. So moving into the midfield, and obviously if I'm going to use my two free transfers at the back, if I want to make any other moves, it would have to be for a hit. So I'm fairly lucky that my midfield five are looking pretty good for this week. Salah at home to Brentford is my captaincy option at the moment. I think that because Brentford are without their two first choice or second choice left backs in Henry and Hickey, they'll have to be fairly rotated there. And even though I still expect Brentford to be decent defensively, Salah against a left back who isn't used to playing there week in, week out is hopefully going to take advantage. And I think that he is going to be a really good captaincy shout for this game week. Beyond that, Saka is probably my second favourite captaincy option. Against Burnley is a great fixture, but Saka did come off last night with a little bit of an ankle knock by the looks of it. I still expect him to play, but I'm going to have to keep my ear to the ground for that one to see whether Arteta says anything in the pre-match press conferences. Historically, he doesn't, so I don't expect to be given any sort of handouts there. But the one thing with Saka is if he's anywhere near fit, he tends to play. And after losing against Newcastle, I'd expect Arsenal to want to go into the international break on a high. So I'd expect Saka to play if he's anywhere near fit. That being said, it's enough to put me off the captaincy armband for now. But if it looks like he's fully fit and firing, then I would consider that as well. For what it's worth, I think overall I still slightly favour Salah. So my armband is fairly locked on him as it stands. Beyond that, Bowen and Gordon both scoring in the previous game week. I can hardly get rid of them right now, both with good fixtures. Nottingham Forest at home for Bowen. Forest have been good recently, but mainly at home. Away from home, they're a bit of a different prospect, and I'd expect West Ham to get back to winning ways in this game and hopefully bag a couple of goals. Bowen has gotten really good underlying data, especially in terms of XG so far this season. So I'm still pretty happy holding on to him for the foreseeable. Gordon as well. Against Bournemouth away from home, that's a great fixture from an attacking standpoint. But even more than that, it looks quite likely that he could get some minutes at centre forward once again. So he could be playing out of position in that Newcastle front line. Wilson came off with a little bit of a knock. I don't expect Isak to be fit again. So it looks like Gordon might be starting at centre forward. And even if he doesn't, Wilson probably won't get 90 minutes, so he probably ends the match at centre forward anyway. So I really like the look of him as a budget enabler this game week. And then finally, Son. Okay, Spurs have got a lot of injury issues, and that is something to monitor, especially if Maddison's out. That is their key chief creative asset, not creating chances for Heung-min Son anymore. So that is a problem. But considering the amount of other fires I need to put out, I still back Son to do pretty well over the next few weeks, and if Spurs get any chances, he's going to be the one on the end of them. So Wolves isn't a bad fixture. Son, for me, is an easy hold this week, but if he continues to have issues with the Spurs assets not coming back from injury or suspension and they're not quite looking the same team, then maybe that's an issue to have a look at in the future. However, for now, I'm pretty happy with that midfield five. Saka is the one slight issue in that five. If he has got an actual ankle problem and he looks like he's not going to start this week, I might have to take a hit. So let me know in the comments below which midfielder you'd be prioritising for this week. I'm probably looking at the likes of Mitoma or maybe even Martinelli as the alternative Arsenal midfielder that you could be going for this game week. I think he's likely to do really well against Burnley. So those are two options that I'd highly consider. But to be honest, I'm pretty happy with this five as long as they're all fit and firing. So up front, I'm going with the same two yet again of Erling Haaland away at Chelsea. Now, luckily, the flag for Haaland has already been cleared. He played in midweek, obviously scored 2 goals as well. So I'd expect him to start and do really well against Chelsea. He's an easy hold for me. Again, we go week in, week out with people saying whether or not to sell him, whether or not he's worth the money. For me, I've said it in previous videos, he is still worth the money because I'm still able to get most, if not all, of the players that I want to have with him in my side. Maybe there are 1 or 2 upgrades I could make without him, but I think Haaland is going to explode at some point in the next few game weeks, even without the great fixtures. So I still want to hold him. That being said, Chelsea are a good defence, so I don't think he's my favoured captaincy shout this game week, but as we know, he can explode against anyone at any given time. So he is always a decent captaincy shout. However, away from home, Man City aren't quite as potent. Erling Haaland isn't quite as potent historically away from home. And Chelsea are a good defence. So with all that being said, he's not my captaincy option this week. I'm still pretty happy to hold him. Beyond that, Ollie Watkins blanked twice in a row now. Very frustrating. But if you've actually watched the games, okay, Nottingham Forest was a complete capitulation. I'm not sure what Aston Villa had planned for that game, but it didn't go to plan. The week before that, though, he was extremely unlucky, not just to get a return, but a haul. So I still think he's an easy hold for the next 3 game weeks at least. And then after that, they go up against Man City and Arsenal. So you could possibly look at moving him on then. I think because the other options are also not really firing at the moment, Darwin obviously had the 1,000,001 chances against Luton but couldn't find the net. So I don't think too many people are going to be tempted to bring him in this week. And then Alvarez as well. I don't think you want to double up on the City attack right now if you haven't already. That being said, I don't think he's a sell this week, but I wouldn't be buying him away at Chelsea ahead of Fulham at home for Ollie Watkins. So with all of that in mind, I'm very happy with my front 7 in total. There aren't too many issues there. Saka is the one issue, potentially. So if he is injured, then I need to potentially take a hit. But I haven't actually made my transfers yet, so fingers crossed he's fine and I can use my 2 transfers in the back line as I mentioned earlier on in this video. So there you have it. That's my team selection for game week 12. I do have the exact money for those moves, so I probably need to move early this game week. So if we get later news that any of my other players are injured or Saka isn't going to be fit for Burnley, then I might have to take a hit. So do make sure you follow me on X at FPL Pricey in case I make any other last minute moves. For the time being, though, I'm pretty happy with how my team's set up for Game Week 12, but do let me know in the comments below how your team is setting up. If you've got any dilemmas ahead of the deadline, I'll try and answer them before the deadline in the comments below. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. It really does go a long way, and I really appreciate the support so far on what is quite a young channel. And I hope that all of your arrows are green ahead of Game Week 12, and I'll see you on the other side of Game Week 12 as we prepare for Game Week 13 after the international break.